everybody. My name's Stephen Bowles, and you're listening to another episode of the Production Channel.
Shatter.
And I'm joined by my good friend Clem. What's up, Clem?
Hey, buddy. What's going on?
Not too much, man. Excited about today. We've got a really different take on sort of the live event production aspect. Someone who's really more dialed in from the stage. But before we introduce him, real quick, Clem, tell me what the heck are we doing here? What is the Production Channel?
Well, you know how passionate I am about the people in which I work and the different facets of the production industry. We are the people backstage. We are the people that are making it happen for the messengers to deliver their message, for the audience to receive it. We are the heart, the soul of the industry.
Well, and honestly, this podcast and then really just the Production Channel as a whole is built to deliver stories and really kind of bring the people from backstage out and give them a way to kind of share their stories and share kind of how it is that they got there. And so anyways, a great example of that is who we've got on today. So we've got Mark Sanborn, who is the president of Sanborn and Associates. And really, he has built a career doing hundreds, if not, I'm sure, even more. I forget what you said there, Mark. Probably thousands of shows really around the globe where he gets up there and he's the one, he's really keynoting the sessions, right? He's the one up there delivering either the motivational speaking or really driving home the point for the client and for the audience there. And so, Mark, we're really excited to have you on the Production Channel today.
Thanks. Well, I have an interesting job. I'm a professional speaker, but we always explain it like this. I run a leadership development idea studio. The primary way that I convey my ideas is through keynote speeches, but I also write books. We have training resources. We have an office here in South Denver, Colorado, and a boardroom. But the point of my arrow is working with folks like you to put on a show for my clients. And what I do is I talk about leadership and turning ordinary into extraordinary. Leadership is kind of my passion. I have a business background, and I talk to primarily business leaders, but I've talked to everybody from people in the cremation industry to colleges, nonprofits, churches, Fortune 100 companies, and everybody in between.
I heard you on the presentations, and man, it was powerful. It was motivational. It got me inspired. The Fred factor. Please just tell us about the Fred factor.
Sure. Well, let me just cue it up and say that when I speak, I'm very cognizant that my success or failure hinges on what happens backstage. And frankly, I think what I do on stage is easier than what the client does and the production company does in planning the meeting, and then what happens in terms of actually executing the meeting. There's a lot more, I think, that can go wrong in that long process versus the 1 hour that I'm typically on stage. My goal is to be really easy to work with. And I also like people who are like-minded. I did a show once, I was emceeing an entire event, and the stage manager was asking me some questions about what I wanted. And I say, hey, what do you want me to do? And she said something that I thought was such a great attitude for all of us. And she said, well, I'm here for you. And I think when everybody comes with that attitude, you don't bump up against egos, and you don't bump up against problems that would arise when everybody says, hey, it's about I've worked with production crews where somebody was just so anally intent on their little piece of the puzzle, whether it was the audio or the imaging or whatever, that it was like everything else took a back seat, including my presentation. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And the reason that I love that woman who said, the stage manager, I'm here for you, is the Fred factor is about a guy that delivered mail for 30 plus years in Denver. And he did it in such an extraordinary way that he took what, frankly, would be a pretty simple job, put mail in a box every day, and he made it artistry. And he did that through these 4 principles I talk about in the book. One is he was conscious about making a difference. And I always tell people, you rarely make a positive difference accidentally. You don't typically go through the day and say, wow, I just really made a big difference in somebody's life. How did that happen? It was something that you set out to do. So I would say awareness is the first step for any professional, seeing those opportunities, looking for them. The second part is on relationship. we don't always in the short time we work with people on a show, other than the people that work together on an ongoing basis, we aren't really forming lasting relationships like we think about relationships. What we're doing is we're making connections. And I always tell people that a connection is a shared moment of affinity. It's that time that you're interacting with somebody. Maybe it's just long enough, for me, for the audio guy to put my mic on. And if I can just make a little connection, have a little bit of fun, inquire into that guy's day or that gal's life, that connection counts for a lot. And that's the second thing, is
Mm-hmm.
relationship or connection. And the third thing is, it's about creating value and looking for little ways to create value. If I say to a client, I'll say, "Is there water on stage?" And they'll say, "Well, let me get you some." I'll say, "No, that's all right. I've got a bottle right here." I want to make, people expect the speech to be good. People expect the production to be good. I mean, if you don't deliver on the basics, and it doesn't matter what you do, you can't make up for a lack of value by the little things.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing to me is that once you get the big things, then it's the little things that people remember. That your attitude or your willingness to, it's so funny. Sometimes people will say, "I know we're supposed to do a sound check at 7. Could you come at 6:45? God, I'm so sorry." I'm like, no big deal. It's 6:45, and they're so, and I guess it's because, it just amazes me because I'm a simple guy, but I guess there are
Yeah.
people that, get crazed about that kind of stuff. Here's, I guess what I'll say, that here's where we all share a similar focus. To me, it's about the audience. I want the audience to have a great experience. I'm a piece of that experience. I'm not the totality of that experience. And
Mm.
if the room is too hot, or the sound sucks, or my slides don't work, or, there's 100 things that can take away from that experience, and I only control a very few of them. So it's really a team effort, and that's, I'm not trying to suck up, but that's really the way that I kind of bring my game, my show to the party. The final part is just reinventing yourself every day so you don't get bored and burn out. And frankly, I tell people my speech is free. All that money I charge them is to get on and off the airplane,
Right, right. Yeah. I
because
remember you
you know
saying that. But
that's
when you're talking about the big picture, right? You're talking about you're just a part of that big picture. How do you get somebody to get the to be aware of the connection that their one role plays in the big picture though?
I'll say, people that don't feel significant rarely choose to act significantly or be significant. I think we have to remind people that the little things they do make a big difference, and not to speak down to them or to be juvenile, but just say, if this clicker doesn't get into the CEO's hands backstage, it's
Yep.
going to be an awkward moment on stage when he's looking around going, "Where's my clicker?" I always, assumption is such a deadly thing. I love the scene from Philadelphia where Denzel Washington says to Tom Hanks, Tom Hanks is playing an AIDS patient who's getting representation for discriminatory workplace practices, and Denzel Washington says, "Explain it to me like I'm a second grader." And
Yes.
I, and
Yes.
I,
Great
I
line.
love that attitude because, you know, sometimes people, it's so funny to me. I've probably put on 5,000 microphones in my life, if you count putting them on, putting them off in different venues. And I'll get these mic guys that won't let me touch the mic, right? And I'm like, "Hey, I'm with you, man. I'll tell you what, let's get it on. Let's do it your way. Maybe I'll have a few suggestions, a little feedback." but I try to, just kind of go with the flow. But I always love a guy, who's like being real anal and controlling and says, "Well, you probably put a few of these on." And I'm like, "Dude, I could do your job if I ever gave up the speaking gig."
So, Mark, what in sort of your career, tell us the different types of venues you've worked in, and in terms of like the complexities, right? I'm sure you've certainly done ballrooms. Have you ever done theaters? You've ever done television? And just kind of as you've interacted with more of the production aspects in those different venues, have you learned things? Have you ever had any like massive just failures where the microphone, just went out and you had to yell from the stage? Tell us kind of some of those war stories from your world.
Wow. Well, how many days do we have on this podcast? It's so funny. The ones that come to mind are the most challenging or the biggest. Probably my all-time favorite is I once worked in a big casino in Vegas where they had me speaking to like 100 people in a room with a 30-foot tree in the middle. I mean, a giant ass tree, like a full-blown
Nice.
tree. And now if you do the math on this, you'll realize that no matter where you stand, half the audience is behind the tree. And I said to the meeting planner who'd paid, my fee, I mean, this was not an inexpensive event. And she said, well, look, it's the only room I could get, go with it. So, hey, I always say, I'm the cab driver, you're the passenger, whatever you say. And so I spent the entire speech walking back and forth around the tree, kind of pacing so that at any one time, at least half the audience could see me.
Well, I hope the lighting guy prepared for that.
Yeah, or I'm just thinking as a video director, that would be miserable.
It was mostly about food and audio. I think they could have piped me in through the loudspeakers, and I could have been as effective, from another room. I've worked, in the round. I've worked I love a lot of times in Vegas. I'll do boxing ring setups where the show will be themed. Those to me are fun venues. A lot of people get thrown by them, but I always say, just remember to work all sides of the audience. I don't know that I have come up with any particular tricks other than, I guess, if there's one gimmick, one technique I rely on, and that is don't be thrown by anything, because something weird is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get thrown by it, the other thing I do is whenever there's a problem, I try never to throw anybody under the bus. Sometimes it's easy to get kind of pissy and say, hey, what's going on? We tested this mic this morning. And then, if I'm a sound guy, I'm like, hey, screw you, buddy. You think you had a bad mic before? Try this. So I try to approach it as not, you're causing me a problem, but we've got a problem. I'm more interested on the solution than I am on who is responsible. And, because I was started out in college in radio, and I love rock and roll, and I've been backstage at so many venues and so many concerts. I have such a great respect for what goes on back there that I really look at it as, a collaborative effort. I'm not there for them. They're not there for me. We're there for each other. Let's see I've done venues on tents by the ocean, that's always fun. I guess if I was going to give production folks who are advising clients a suggestion, that would be to make sure the client prioritizes what's most important to you, the venue or the impact of the program. Because we all love, I think doing a buffet dinner under a tent in Maui is fabulous. But if you're trying to convey some serious information or educate, anything short of entertaining, the venue trumps the performance. And I think very often meeting planners, like all of us, they try to do too much. Hey, we want a really good speaker. We want a really sexy venue. We want great lighting. I've had people say, well, we can't use your slides because it'll screw up the lighting. Okay. By the way, I didn't use, you guys might be interested. At 31 years, I didn't use any slides for like 28.
Wow.
I think we've changed the way people think, and I'm still messing around. I'm trying to go more and more and more to image only slides. It's pretty hard to do when you do business speaking like I do. But if I were king of the world, I loved just me in the audience. But there's some benefits. I can argue it either way. But for 28 or 31 years, I never used slides.
I will say that I noticed that that most of your slides were just like a general image, and which allowed the director to take more IMAG. And I remember the organizer of the meeting was asking for more IMAG on comm because your slides were they weren't wordy.
Yeah, they kind of speak for themselves. They support the message. They aren't the message. I'll tell you, the only thing that's tricky, I have a couple slides that are very time sensitive. And my perfect world is where you have a fixed slide and an IMAG, or you have two IMAGs and one fixed slide. I love it because I think it's very challenging to do that mix, on the fly.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes I'll say something, hit the advance and get, and I'm used to this big laugh and I hit the advance and nothing happens. And I glance over and I realize, because I'm still on the screen and the image that gets the big laugh, it hasn't caught up yet.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's what my background is live directing live cameras for corporate events for the most part, and so absolutely when we only have the one screen. And I'm mixing in and out. I'm actually actively trying to watch the graphics, advance, but I have to wait till you advance it. So there's sort of this relationship that you and I should have, but we don't. Where you've sort of told me that, hey, this is a big laughing slide. I need to get it right there. But instead, I'm just sort of cutting cameras as I see, it fit. And then when the slide changes, I bring them up as they go. So I've been in shows where I've felt that missed opportunity or that mismatch.
But you make a good point. If you talk it through, that's the key, is never assuming that, because there have been times I thought my advance was live and I found out later, it was a signal advance that somebody else was doing.
Yeah.
And I'm going, now this is information I could have used before I started my program.
Well, and you tap into something there that I think would be good for this sort of conversation here, which is, we do these gigs, event after event after event. And so you're rolling into a ballroom or you're rolling into another event and you're just thinking, all right, I've been hired in to do this, job. What are my circumstances in this one? And then sort of adapting appropriately. We're doing the same thing, right? We walk into another gig and we're like, all right, well, who's, the keynote speaker here or who's the motivational speaker here? Got to get him a microphone, got to figure out if he's got slides. So we're all kind of entering in from the same, way where it's like, I've got to equip this person and you've got to equip us. But that's often where it stops, right? You don't actually come back and meet with me, or I don't take the initiative to walk out and say, hey, Mark, so during your, 30 minutes up here where you're trying to engage the audience, how can I help you keep that engagement, on point the entire time? And me, at least for me, speaking honestly, I would do that sometimes, but not on the regular, just because it's, to an extent, it's hard to stay that active when there's so many presenters that go from session to session to session. It can get to a point where I would go, hey, you're just another keynote speaker. I just need to get you your camera pointed on you, get a microphone on you, and let you do your gig.
Yeah.
As opposed to really getting out there and helping you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And I think it's incumbent on me, to be cognizant, over the years. Like I said, I keep learning stuff, and to say, hey, is this a live, or is this a signal advance? And then to be proactive, knowing that, I'm not the only guy on the program. And, I'll tell you from a self-serving standpoint, when you work with a speaker and he or she's really easy to work with and they do a good job, makes your life easier to say to the next client, there's a lot of speakers out there, but hey, I worked with this guy in Orlando and he's a good egg and we get along great and I know how his show works. I mean, that's always my hope, right? I mean, from a self-serving standpoint, not just that the speech will be good. If the speech is good, but I've been a real horse's ass, you're not going to recommend me. You're going to be like, oh yeah, he's a good speaker, but he's not a nice guy.
Right.
I love when I roll in and a production company says, hey, we worked together before. And I'm like, cool. I mean, that's always icing on the cake.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I love the way that the two of you, like I'm an outsider listening to the relationship that you all are saying you probably should have had on a show site. That's encouraging words for a future director or current director or a future presenter or current presenter who may be listening. Take the time to speak with the people that will be executing some of your message, helping to get your message across, whether you're the person on the stage or the person behind the stage. We're all a team effort in doing this. And one thing that you've mentioned, Mark, is that, you're learning something new all the time. But how long have you been doing this and how did you get your start?
Well, full-time as a pro, 31 years. I got started, I started speaking at the age of 10 in 4-H. I mean, that literally, it was a youth competition. And unlike, you would think, I bombed so badly and was so embarrassed. That's really what got me interested. If I had done okay, like a lot of things you do as a kid, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, I might be a civil engineer right now. But I got interested in speaking and spoke in a lot of competition. And then through some involvement in another interesting organization, Future Farmers of America, FFA, because I was a farm kid.
Really?
I was state and national president. So many people heard me speak in that capacity that when I went to college, they called me to come speak. And one day spirit of free enterprise set in and I said, I charge. And they said, great, how much? And that was a problem because I really didn't know how much. When they asked, and my roommate worked at Wendy's, and in 2 weeks, I think he made $150 and smelled like a French fry. So I said 150, and they said, great. And I thought, isn't America a wonderful place? And and I worked my way. I worked my way through college doing 150, 200, $250 gigs, literally, to little groups, 30-minute, 20-minute, and and they were like, patriotic and motivational, and they were I probably quoted Zig Ziglar and Og Mandino a lot. But then I actually went into sales and marketing. I thought it would behoove me to actually have some business career before I launched into speaking full time.
That's interesting. So how are you, because for us, we kind of a similar route, but if you're a freelance show technician, audio, lighting, video, you're sort of navigating that path of building a portfolio, right, or a book of production companies or into clients that are willing to hire you, and then it's kind of probably a lot like yours, where once you do one or two good, then you're sort of in, and you're on their go-to list of to fill the hole, right? And if you're really great, then you become their sort of de facto. If I'm doing any show, I'm going to use this director. I'm going to use this A1. So for you, how do you? I mean, honestly, like how does a career as a motivational speaker work? Like, how do you even book gigs? And how did you figure out how to charge? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, the one thing we have in common is you're only as good as your last show. Most careers, you get a performance review once a year. We get one at the end of every event. The difference is, you do have, what you do is a template. I mean, I know the ingredients change, but a client that will love me as a keynoter, because that's pretty much what I am, a keynoter. And even though I've written 8 books and have a lot of material, most clients want a different keynoter every year. They may bring you back eventually, and of course I always hope that they do. But the thing I'm proudest of is the thing that is probably my biggest challenge, and that is I've been in the business 31 years. And there was a time when I was, on a rocket, right? I was the new, a long time ago, but I was the new, greatest, latest speaker. Everybody goes through that, but you don't stay the newest speaker for very many years because there's people chomping at the bit, Chilean miners that come out of the trapped in the mines and go on the speaking circuit, or people win a gold medal, climb a mountain, put out a fire. I mean, and I'm not being flip, but we live in a very event-driven world.
I tied my shoe.
Yeah.
I want to be a speaker.
I always tell people, the bad news is if I ever get kidnapped by terrorists, I've been kidnapped by terrorists. The good news is if I survive, man, I got a whole nother career built out as a speaker.
You got stories.
Yeah, I got stories.
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry. Go for it.
No. But, it's about staying relevant, which is why I keep writing books. Because if I go to a client I worked with 10 years ago and says, hey, you want to have me back to say the same thing? Odds are they're going to go, no, we heard of this guy that, climbed Mount Everest and he did it naked, right? And he talks about the power of overcoming severe odds. So I have to come back and that's why, and I've been fortunate that I've had several legitimate bestsellers, not just Amazon 10-minute bestsellers. I've had books that were on the bestseller list on and off for months, nearly a year. And that's what keeps you got to establish yourself as somebody, man or woman, with something important to say. And that's the big challenge. How well you say it, yeah, that's important too. But it's not just about what you say, or not just how well you say it, but having something that a meeting planner or an audience member will say, I need to hear that.
Wow.
Yeah, you know what? I'm thinking about all the times I've been backstage and I'm directing cameras, and I would start out, into a keynote presentation. I'm like, okay, cool. This guy's going to be up here for the next, 40 minutes. Sweet. I'm going to put the cameras on him. I'm going to listen on my ear for the show caller to switch me between graphics every once in a while. And I'm going to turn to my computer and I'm going to start emailing, or I'm going to start, because to me, it's almost like I'm in cruise control when you guys get up there. But I say a lot to say, you'd be surprised how many times I end up getting just as engaged in with what you guys are saying as your audience is out there in the front. And I'm just curious to you, do you think about that? Do you think that while you're delivering, whether it's this story or this motivational speech or really just this challenge on any level to 5,000 people in the audience, do you even consider or think about that there's 50 people backstage and out at front of house that are also listening to you, and they might actually be taking stuff away from this as well?
Yeah, and I'm gratified because occasionally, someone will come up and say, "Hey, I, really enjoyed your program," and I know from experience that they were not obligated or they had no reason to listen other than they chose to. So,
Mm.
you don't want to get a big head. I hate it when I hear speakers talk about, I'm out there changing lives. No, you're not. People change their own lives.
Hmm.
You may influence them and encourage them and even maybe on a good day inspire them. And that's really impactful and important work. But ultimately, if somebody will say to me, your book changed my life, and I'll say, thank you. I acknowledge that compliment, but you changed your life. I'm glad that my book gave you the ideas or the impetus, but you changed your life. But on the other hand, you don't want to go out there with this idea of, hey, this is just another show, and I'm just going to sleepwalk through it and nobody will know the difference, because you do, I always kind of have this formula. I figure 90% of the audience wants to be entertained, and at the end of the speech, they're going to go out in the hallway and get their coffee, and their life will be exactly the same. But 10% of the audience, they're kind of wired like me. I mean, I honestly got into this business because I believe that in the power of ideas, spoken, written
Mm-hmm.
ideas. And I just kind of live by faith that the people that needed to hear the message were in the audience, and that a few of them actually go, you know what, I can do this.
So, Mark, how many, just kind of again trying to relate it more to the production industry and just really the people who are, coordinating both events and broadcasts, et cetera. We're always trying to figure out what's the, I guess, work-life balance. How do you travel for 5 days straight and then come home, spend 3 days with your family, then go out and do it again? I guess, we think about it in terms of an entire gig, because a gig for us is a day or two of load in, 2 or 3 days of show, a day of strike, travel in and out. So that could be 4 to 5 days on an average. You're sort of keynoting for a session. So I guess a couple thoughts, right? How many days you work a year, or what's your sort of target? And then how do you balance the calendar out? How do you sort of make that make sense in your world now with 20 plus years of experience doing this?
Well, I did it backwards. I was single. I didn't get married till I was 37. So I did a lot of the crazy road work. I think my craziest year, I was on the road 220 days, speaking,
Whoa.
doing low fee stuff and public seminars. And so when I got married, I had built my career to the point where I started looking at trying to find a balance between days and revenue. I have this theory that I've seen proven quite a few times, that if you're, as a speaker, not in front of an audience 50 times a year, you fall off radar. And it's not a magic number. So I always want, my goal always now is to do 50 paid events a year. I also do some ministry stuff and some pro bono things and some promotional things for my books. So a good year for me is 50 plus, and I can do up to 60 without breaking much of a sweat. It's not as easy or as much fun as it used to be, but it's not onerous. It's not like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm moaning and groaning. My kids now are into high school and college. So, my wife knew me as a speaker when she married me. It wasn't a bait and switch. She knew what she was getting into. I didn't have like this regular real job. And so, I just basically, my commitment, is as silly as it sounds, is before it stops being fun, I'm going to quit doing it, because I don't ever want an audience to go, oh man, I heard him towards the end of his career, and he obviously wasn't happy. He wasn't enjoying it. And if that
Yeah.
means speaking less and finding some alternative revenue streams because the travel becomes even more challenging, I'll cross that bridge when I get there.
Mm.
I'm a fanatic about exercise. It keeps your brain working. I'm not a health food fanatic. I love bourbon and beer, but I do exercise a lot. And I also try to, I stay in touch. The beauty of technology is with text and email and phone, I can stay in touch with my wife I probably am in touch with my wife as much during the day on the road as I am at the office. The only difference is I don't go home at night, and sleep in the same bed.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's true though that balance of working and coming back home, and the technology now today making that easier. That's kind of been a theme we've been hearing through the various people that we've had on the production channel already. So that's awesome to hear that even spreads to the kind of presenter side of things as well too.
Yeah. So, Mark, as we close out here, I want to, as one of those people that were working backstage and heard your message, and it reached me, and enough so to stop what I was doing to strike up a conversation with you. For people who have yet to meet you or to see your presentation, what is that one nugget that you would give to a tech or somebody backstage or just anybody about what's that one nugget that you would give?
Well, it's from the Fred factor, and it's something that Fred the postman told me, and then I paraphrased it. He said, I asked him how he was able to live such a full and successful life, and he said he laid in bed at the end of the day, and the only thing he worried about is did he waste any of the day he just finished. And I was
Mm.
struck by this idea, and I phrase it like this: fear nothing but to waste the present moment. Any regrets I have were regrets of disengaging or wasting time. And by the way, that doesn't mean you need to be working all the time. Sometimes you make the most of the moment by kicking back and going, I just need to read a book or talk to my spouse or make a phone call or stare into space. But it's about, I guess I would call it intentionality. I think we all tend to sleepwalk through life. The older you get, the more you realize life is not indefinite, that there's a definitive ending point. We mostly don't know when that is, but if we just are engaged in the moments that we have and are paying attention at the end of our lives, we'll have done pretty well.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for being here, sharing your message, and for taking the time to speak to the production channel and all the people backstage.
Well, thank you, and
Thanks, Mark.
thanks for all the work you all do. I mean, I appreciate you all, and look forward to if I'm doing a show sometime and you recognize the name from the podcast, make sure you say hello.
And with that, Bowles, do you have anything else, buddy?
No, man. Everybody just know you can, if you're interested in getting a hold of Mark, you can get him at marksanborn.com, MarkSanborn.com. And yeah, Mark, just thank you so much. It's a different side of the industry, or sort of a voice that we haven't normally had on here, which is more from the stage. And but we're all in the same thing together. We're putting on a great show and experience for those who come into the room. So it's really nice to hear from you today, Mark. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And so, well, Clem, you know what we're doing here. This is the production channel. This is for everybody who's traveling around the globe, working backstage. We want this to be something you guys can listen to and get a closer kind of pulse on what's going on with the industry. So that's it. That's a wrap for today. Please tune in next week for the production channel.
Chatter.